And
Okay.
you're recording on your phone.
Yep, I'm already going. So
great. Let's just do one little cross-country clap.
okay. Do you want me to do one too?
Yeah, just it doesn't have to be
Okay.
totally in sync, but 1, 2, 3. Just like a jazz record. Okay. Okay, please tell the radio audience who you are, where you are, and what you do.
My name is MC Taylor, and I'm speaking to you from Durham, North Carolina, where I live and work as the songwriter and singer and guitar player of a band called His Golden Messenger.
That name came from what?
That name just came from the cosmos somewhere a long time ago. I probably started using that name in 2006. I was still living in California then. And I was looking for something to call the new musical project that I was starting to embark on. And it seemed to fit. That combination of words seemed to fit. There's something biblical about it. There's something that connects it in my mind to old tape machines, the hiss of an old tape. So it seems to work. Now I can't really get rid of it. Even if I wanted to, I don't think I could change it. It's too attached to the music in my mind.
Well, for folks who don't know your music or maybe just discovering you recently, I mean, you have a very rustic acoustic rock and roll soul bass, but you came from playing in like hardcore bands, and that feels like an echo almost of those days. Were you in a band? I think you're in a band called Ex Ignota, I think, right?
Yeah, Ex Ignota, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you learn a lot from those more intense early days that you could kind of still channel in this quote unquote softer music? Because you have themes, especially in this new record, Quietly Blowing It, that definitely are not soft, right? It is some pretty dark explorations of what we're all going through right now. And I feel like you could feel that punk rock energy underneath the chords and the soft singing. You could feel that rage simmering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I have carried forward into the music that I make now a lot of the attitude and aesthetic that I learned as a late teen that was so important to me. And like you say, I think I've just I articulate it in different ways now. I'm still, in a lot of ways, I'm the same human that I was then. I'm interested in a lot of the same things. But my musical tastes and aesthetics and desires about what I want to do with my own music have changed. There are a lot of people that start with the broader diaspora of punk rock, and they stay there, and it feels very genuine for them to be in that place. Like, think about Ian MacKaye and Discord Records. He has continued to make music that exists in that broader universe, and it always feels genuine. For me, I was driven to kind of turn my music into something else. But the whole like DIY aesthetic of that I really learned in punk rock, booking your own tours, pressing your own records, making your own flyers, making your own record covers, you're writing your own zines, creating intentional communities is something that I continue to be very interested in. And frankly, His Golden Messenger wouldn't exist without that DIY aesthetic. I put out my first 3 records by myself, pressing 200 and 300 copies per album, and that never seemed like a weird thing to do at all. It seemed perfectly natural, to just do it myself. And I think that, for a lot of people that don't have the experience of this sort of like DIY, community building aesthetic, I don't know if I don't know. I see a lot of people get stuck at that place, even like, how am I going to put my first record out? I don't know. I need to find a record label. I need a manager, and all that stuff came to me later. But I never thought about that stuff at the beginning.
Well, I think it's a good springboard coming out of that scene. I grew up in Chicago, and I joke that the hardest, most intense music I ever played was probably when I was like in 8th grade,
Sure. Yeah.
because you were just so full of fire and you didn't care if anyone liked it or not. It's like that
Sure.
punk rock aesthetic of just like, we're going to go to the talent show and we're going to play as loud as possible until the music teacher literally unplugs the electricity and kicks us off stage. Like the most like rock and roll moment I've ever had as a musician was probably when I was 14.
Right. Sure. But the other thing about punk rock, the stuff that I feel like I was involved with, was it was always, the music was always working in tandem um, with, with our developing politics at the time. Right. So like, there was always a table, run by organizations like Food Not Bombs that were collecting, that were doing a canned food drive or collecting money, to feed people. There was always someone on stage talking about, very left-leaning politics. And so, music and progressive politics, however, explicit or implicit it might be, has always been a thing. And it's so crazy to like, I realize that many people don't have that experience, I guess, but it's so funny to me to have people complain about, when I express some political stance, like
Yeah, it's like,
to have people say like, what are you doing? You're a musician. I'm like, well, I don't understand you at all.
well, also you've been doing this a long time. I mean, the song Resurrection Blues, which I love off your first record, Country High East Cotton, or one of your first records. You could feel, I think, the theme starting a lot of your work of just questioning everything,
Sure.
and wondering like the point of our devotion to various traditions,
Mm-hmm.
and rooting it in blues and the sort of gospel backdrop, but having this wide open dialogue with an uncaring universe in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, I do think a lot of that stuff comes from, um, not only punk rock, but being a very omnivorous, explorer of culture from a really young age. I don't know where I got that from or why. I think a lot of it comes from the sort of like solitary questing of, I was a skateboarder, and I don't know what it's like now, but when I was growing up, skateboarding was so, again, intertwined with 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 music that existed on the fringes, right? So punk rock, hip hop, noise music, and it also coexisted with politics, and I think that was just a world that was fascinating to me, and it felt like it was, um, not just ingesting the culture that was on offer on the television set, but rather like was building something that meant something real to those of us in those spaces.
A lot of people associate you with the North Carolina roots music scene, but you grew up somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California, in Orange County. I went to school for the first time in Santa Barbara, and then I moved to San Francisco, where I lived for about 10 years. So I gradually moved my way up the coast of California. I
That is
still
a
very much.
full that is a full California experience. Orange County, Santa Barbara, San Francisco. That
Yeah,
runs
I
the
mean
gamut.
it's pretty privileged California experience, because there are a whole lot more spaces in California. It's such a massive state. It's insane. Um, but so I mean I'm so connected. I feel so connected to California, even though I've lived in the South for 14 or 15 years. It's my home. It's where my parents live. My sister and her family live there. Um, yeah, I really feel like, you know, um, culturally maybe is the right word. I feel like I'm culturally a mix of both places.
What does your folks do?
My folks are retired now, but they were both public school teachers.
Hmm.
Or my mom actually ended her career as a middle school vice principal, which is what she did longer than taught in the classroom.
Did they play a lot of music in the house that sunk in, or did you rebel against their tastes?
I didn't rebel against their tastes. At the time that I was growing up, they would often describe themselves as hippies, right?
Okay.
Like, you know, I would ask, like, were you guys hippies? And they'd be like, yeah, we were hippies.
Did they go
And
to Woodstock?
no, no, my parents weren't hippies. That's the thing. Like, I I have some friends whose parents were actual hippies. It was a whole different thing, even though I think, hippiedom exists on a spectrum. My parents were like weekend hippies, maybe.
That's
Um,
like my dad is like the most devoted Grateful Dead fan I've ever seen, and yet never did drugs
yeah,
ever.
there you go, man. It's great. It's allowed. We will allow it. So, my parents had a small record collection, I would say, compared to my own record collection, it was minuscule. But they had good shit. They had a couple Birds records, Buffalo Springfield. Um, they had a um, what else was in there?
I'm
Joni
glad you.
Mitchell. Joni Mitchell was a big one.
Hmm.
Her record Court and Spark was a fave around the house. Um, the Beatles. But like my parents' musical interests, like a lot of people, and there's no shame whatsoever in this. Kind of, I think by the time they had kids, by the time we started being born, like their musical interests just like flatlined, right? So like, it was like they got to maybe Buffalo Springfield or something. And then from there on out for the rest of our lives, it was like a new record here or there that they might have heard on the radio or something. Um, so, but my dad was a guitar player, and he played a lot around the house, and he's super gifted. Really beautiful guitar player, really beautiful singer. He would often get hired to sing at weddings and stuff. That was just like that was he was really like, if you were of a certain uh if you were of a certain Southern California vibe and you were getting married, like my dad was the dude that you wanted to play at your wedding, even if you didn't know him. He just is like that beautiful voice.
Did he play at your wedding?
Yeah,
You ever
he
get him
played
up
it.
on stage with you?
Well, I didn't sing with him. It was during the ceremony. He played an Everly Brothers song.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
I get my dad on blues harmonica sometimes when we come back through Chicago.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's pretty sweet. I mean, like I was in California in June, and my dad and I played together, and it's always I don't know, that feels good. And I still think of his acoustic guitar that he had when I was a kid, and that he still has, is like the benchmark for what an acoustic guitar should sound like. I don't know that it's particularly the best sounding guitar, but I just have this emotional connection to it. It's a 1964 D28 that he bought new,
Mm.
and it's just so beautiful.
Let's go into the new record, Quietly Blowing It, which I feel like we all do a little each day. You
Yeah.
you have this unique ability to, I think, concede defeat, I think, as a man, as a American, without losing hope. Somehow, like, conceding defeat is like starting over, like we can start over from the ground up in a way.
Mhm.
And that opening track, way back in the way back,
Mhm.
um, I see a really cool comparison with the title track "Heart Like a Levy," which came out in 2016,
Yeah.
of this sort of slow build, sort of easing us in to a really intense dialogue, again, with the biggest questions of our age. Not like
Right.
not hitting us over the head with it too fast, right? You don't have the drums and the horns and a lot of the stuff come in till 2-3 minutes in, right?
Right.
You're kind of like guiding us through the darkness softly, right? So we
Yeah.
have a chance to like be aware of the craziness that's happening around us. But I love the way you kind of throw everything at the wall, right? There's a lot of a lot of stuff. I have to go back and like look at the lyrics several times, and obviously that line, up with the mountains, down with the system that keeps us in chains, it really sticks in your head.
Yeah.
What does that line mean to you when you sing it?
Um, I mean, I've certainly spent a lot of time, not only in the past year, the past several years. Certainly, the question was uh, intensified in the past year. Like, what kind of world are we trying to build for ourselves here?
Right.
What kind of world are we intending to pass on to our kids? Because we have the capacity to build any kind of world we want,
Right.
right? We have the capacity um, to live in to create a society in which we're not wondering if someone is carrying a gun, right?
Right.
And we live in a world in which it's not necessary that Palestinians, for instance, live in an apartheid state in Israel. Um, these are choices that we've made. Not you or I individually, but these are choices that those that have been allowed to make the choices have made. Um, so I think that is embedded in that line. What kind of world do we want to make? Do we want to make um, a world that burns, or do we want um, to chase money up until the very end, or is there another way?
But also, is there a theme that nature is the sort of healing element between it all somehow?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that yeah,
Because you often bring in the sounds of your environment, crickets, the
yeah,
woods, as sort of this uh soothing through line
Yeah.
through the darkness, right? That like no
Right.
matter what is happening, our
Yeah.
yard is gonna keep living without us in a way. Like
Yeah.
the mountains are gonna keep evolving around us, regardless of the apartheid states we create. You know,
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no version of this world in which we get to to uh to burn down nature and still go on. You know what I
right?
mean? There's absolutely no version of the world that we are the planet that we're living on in which we get to strip it naked and get to continue enjoying life as human beings. I mean, that's obvious. Um, that's it's never been clearer than this very day that we're speaking. You know what I mean? It's like every day it every day it becomes the planet uh more urgently screams at us like y'all need to pay attention.
Hmm.
um I was just where are you right now?
LA.
LA. Okay, so like I was in California in June, mid-June. The fires hadn't really started yet, but they were about to. There's no water there, right? And coming from North Carolina, which is so verdant and there's so much rain, it's so green. I was walking down the path today. I was like, damn, it is so green here.
It's like the jungle.
It's like a jungle. I mean, I really felt like in California, I was standing on the front lines of climate change. You know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
dry, it was hot, there was no water. Um, and at the same time, there are people driving their big cars around and acting like it's all it's okay. I mean, and I don't have any answers to that. You know what I mean? Like I was talking to my parents who were in their, early to mid 70s. I was like, "What are you feeling this? Or are you feeling this anything about?" I mean, it feels different around here than it did when we were kids, right? And
Hmm.
they were like, "Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah, but
it's also so nice here a lot of the time that it's
sure.
hard to uh question everything all the time. Especially I live, about 10 minutes from the beach. It's about 70 and
Yeah,
sunny
yeah,
98% of the time. It's about the best place on earth that I could think of to get stuck in a lockdown.
right,
You're
right.
like, oh, another perfect day. Let's walk
Uh-huh.
around outside. But it is kind of crazy being in a place where you actually are startled by rain. Like
Right.
it doesn't rain. I
Yeah,
had I had breakthrough COVID a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
Um, and in my few sick days, I was relegated to the downstairs music room,
yeah.
couch bed, and we have like skylights. And um, I was not hallucinating, but I was feverish and not feeling great about stuff. And
Hmm.
in the middle of the night, I thought someone was like climbing on our roof. I thought someone was like breaking into our house because I
Yeah.
heard all this noise on the top of the ceiling. And I was like, what is happening? But I noticed that the dog who was sleeping on the chair didn't care. And that
Hmm.
dog is aware of everything. And I was like, someone is like climbing on our roof. And then I realized it was pouring rain,
Oh yeah.
which I had
Right.
not heard in 6 months, 8 months. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know what it sounded like anymore, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the dog's like, yeah, it's just rain. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know people in LA that are buying land or property in other places like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or the
Yeah.
mountains in North Carolina in preparation for California no longer being a viable place to live. And these people are not preppers. You know what I
Right.
mean? These people are like friends of mine that are fellow musicians that are just like, I'm going to stay in LA as long as I can. But there will come a time when it's not habitable anymore, not in a way that feels comfortable. And, that's where we are right now. It's a real thing.
Well, there's those lines, not like you were probably referring to that, but in the song Heart Like a Levy, where you go back to that theme, I swing for the mountains in double time. Do you hear me running? Did I carry my piece of the fire?
Mm-hmm.
Which really hit me the other day.
Yeah, that feels like I wrote that so long ago. It still feels real though. It still feels like words that I'm okay to be singing.
I find with artists like you who have, I think, settled into a real identity and a sound, I think there's this tough balancing act that you have where you put out a record that sounds like you, right? It comes out, you have different collaborators that come in and out. But when I hear a His Golden Messenger song, I know it's you, right? Which I think is a really powerful, impressive thing, right? Except that certain critics who are assholes or want to sort of needle sort of new work, like feel this need to always question why this artist isn't evolving more. Why aren't they transforming themselves every album, right? And I'm sure you don't read bad reviews, but I actually find the most nasty reviews to be actually a compliment in their own way, because they're so pissed off by what they've heard that it's gotten under their skin somehow. And there's no way that you're going to enjoy any of this, but the Pitchfork review of your new record is particularly nasty for whatever reason. And I listened to this record, several times over the last few weeks and just being like, yeah, I feel uplifted. I feel like I can question a lot of what's going on. It's not like a record that is going to change the world immediately on first listen. Do we need that with every record? But this guy, I don't know who it was. I didn't write the author's name. Basically wrote, despite its grand scope and good intentions, the latest album from MC Taylor is the sound of an artist beginning to repeat himself, light music, LITE, for dark times. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what? And then the best part is the songs are explanatory. They're already settled in his head and in his heart. And he wants you to know that good intentions don't guarantee good art. But the funny thing is, you could tell he's so in the music and he pines for your earlier work, like a rejected lover or something. But for me, seeing the themes between Quietly Blowing It and Heart Like a Levy, seeing how they connect feels awesome for me, right? As an artist, as a songwriter who, to a fault, I do the opposite, where I'm like, every album, let's do something completely different. And eventually I'm like, I don't even know what I sound like, And I feel like it's important sometimes to make a record that is you, that like that like is your own sound. What do you think your sound is?
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah. Like, what do you think that you've settled into?
I mean, I don't think that I've settled into anything. I have certain things that I believe convey my music in a way that feels genuine. And I often use those methods because I know them to be dependable. And they're not necessarily, they're not rules that can't be broken,
Sonny.
I mean, I think there's a couple things going on. one is that we need to rethink about how art works, right?
Mm,
And how you know artists evolve,
right.
right? um there are all kinds of ways to do it, and you have to be really, really sharp.
Hmm.
If you're going to be a critic, you have to be really, really sharp to understand how an artist's work is unfolding.
Hmm.
The guy that wrote that Pitchfork review, named Steven Dusner, has
Oh, you know
written.
him?
I know him
Yeah.
well. Um, he's been covering my work effusively for years, a
Right.
decade, a decade. I've done many interviews with him.
Yeah.
Um, he is a nice guy. He is a fine writer. Um, I don't know that he understands how art works. He's not an artist himself, which isn't to say that you can't be a critic, but you need to have a deep and abiding understanding of how art functions. Um, I think in order to um, write a you know what essentially felt kind of like a takedown piece. You
Yeah.
know, um, I read it and I saw who the writer was, and I thought to myself, I knew that we would always end up in this place. Even when this guy was writing effusive reviews of my music,
Right.
I could tell that he didn't understand what was driving my music, what the actual fabric was that
Right.
was creating my music. So I was like, ah, fuck, man, I knew that we were going to end up in this place because you never understood what I was doing to begin with. Um, and it's hard for me to separate my my ego from some grander uh, theoretical view of the value of criticism, right? Like, um, I didn't like that review in part because it kind of hurt my feelings, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other thing is, and this is like a bigger thing, is given the choice between writing a review of a record that you really dislike and a record that you are energized by, don't you think at this point at this moment with everything that is happening around us, don't you think that you would gravitate towards the thing that energizes you? I would
Right.
much rather write about something that I love. So, like, to take the time to write a review that long about something that he dislikes and all the ways that he dislikes made me feel sad. I mean, it made me feel
Yeah.
sad for him.
Well,
That's
I think the thing that somehow disappointed him most, he has this line about how you dive into all this societal upheaval, poverty and gun violence and uh, climate change, but there's a palpable sense of uplift in the songs that contradicts this. It's like, yeah, but I think what we need right now, personally, is a way to find hope in the darkness. Do we need just total despair? Is that like what we need? Because I think a
right.
song like The Great Mystifier, again, goes back to what you do best, which is to almost list all the things that are going through your head at once, right? The things that we maybe don't want to tell people in public, right?
Right.
And almost reminding yourself, pay your debts, learn the lessons, take the blame. But you're
Right.
like admitting that so you can kind of start from a healthy place, which I
Right.
think is really powerful.
and it's just, it bears repeating again and again. I keep saying it. I've said it for so many records now, and people either are not hearing me or they don't want to believe it, but I'm not making a record about the outside world. I'm making a record about what's in my head. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm
Right.
making a record about what's going on between myself and the very small circle of people that I'm interacting with on a regular basis. My two kids, my wife, and a couple other people, right? That's the world of my songwriting. And if people need to overlay something much bigger on it, then they do that at their own peril. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not singing about climate change is in my music because I'm a human being, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not equipped to sing about climate change. I'm equipped to sing about myself as a vulnerable person. And if you hear climate change as a listener in my music, you're not wrong. But also, that's not what I meant. You know what I mean? Like, it's both ways, and to not have the to not have the skill set to 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 understand that means that, you know I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I can only please myself. Like, so.
Well, again, the thing that I like most about a song like The Great Mystifier is the acknowledging sort of it's you acknowledging that we're all confused, right?
uh,
We don't
mhm,
understand it. Nobody understands it until it falls like rain. Radical changes, buddy. Don't you know me? Right?
mhm,
Like this sort of accepting of our own ignorance, you
right.
know, because
Yeah.
we all can talk about climate change and how we can make the world a little better, but then we kind of like don't really know what to do
Hmm.
to make it
Hmm.
better besides just being a decent person,
Right.
maybe, you know?
Yeah. But going back to this idea of like musical evolution and settling into, quote unquote, settling into certain musical identities. One thing that I did this year was basically start a different musical project that is not called His Golden Messenger, that um, attempts to um, sort of show, not show, but like it works with a lot of other types of like, um, the musical language that, for one reason or another, don't end up showing up on His Golden Messenger records.
Mhm.
And so I spent a lot of time this year thinking about, um, what is the personality of this record. um, why don't I use these kinds of sounds on His Golden Messenger records,
Uh-huh.
um, and I don't know, it's been a really interesting process. And I think that when people hear this stuff, it's called Revelators. And when people hear this stuff, some will say like, I totally hear that. I totally hear that as a thing that His Golden Messenger dude does.
Right.
And other people are going to be like, what, I don't know what this is. This doesn't sound like anything that I'm interested in. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, it's so I'm curious to actually, like, that is one thing that, I am curious in a joyful way, curious to see, like, let's see what the vibe is here. I wonder what people are gonna think. I love it. I think it's cool.
Well, I think if there's one silver lining creatively that came out of this pandemic era, it's that a lot of songwriters, musicians, band leaders decided to like do other things
Mm-hmm.
for the first time to try to
Yeah.
break out of their little rut that we also get in, I think.
Yeah.
And I started getting together with some friends in my back patio is the only thing that we could do for, a year, basically, that was somewhat safe.
Yeah.
And we probably like wrote or worked on like 20 songs.
Yeah.
And then we realized like, oh yeah, this little meetup group is a band now, like accidentally.
Right.
And
where do you live in LA?
Santa Monica.
Okay, cool.
And I wanted it to be kind of more of a rock and roll sort of Black Keys blues rock kind of thing, which is again almost going back to what I did in high school,
Right.
like this sort of something a little harder.
Yeah.
Not that Dust Bowl Revival isn't hard. I mean, we sometimes have these big soul rock and roll things, but it was it was like a more cut to the bone, hit him hard kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we recorded some songs at the Sound Factory in Hollywood, and it was like really fun. But now I'm like, what do we do with this music? Like, who wants this music?
Yeah.
It's like a fun little moment in time that you're like, wait, does anyone want this? And I don't know. Maybe they will.
Put it out yourself.
I probably will.
I mean, that's one thing that was so clear in this past year and a half is like, the music business, it can fucking disappear and look, overnight it was done. You know what I mean? Within 3 weeks, it was done. Everyone's tours were canceled. Everybody.
Our tours are getting canceled this week. I mean, we just canceled. We got a music festival canceled yesterday.
I mean, so did I.
Summer's screwed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all that to say that, as a musician, your relationship to the art has to be more than transactional, because when something like this happens, where do you go? I think a lot of us used the time to either heal or to work on new stuff. I think some people were productive, other people were, didn't create a whole lot of new stuff, but they did other sort of work on themselves, but I think underlying everything that we went through in the past year, it was this sense of creativity. Like, creativity is an animating force, and art has to be more than just transactional. And when you're on the road doing the thing night after night, even though you're getting to perform, I think a lot of us can fall into the trap of just like, okay, next show, let's go, like next tour. And I think this past year and a half made us all stop and go like, wait, I'm an artist. You know what I mean? Like, I make art for a living. Like, how do I feel about that? Who am I making the art for? Am I making it for the people in the crowds? Is that who the art is for first and foremost, or is it for me? Neither one of those things is better than the other, but it's definitely something to consider, especially when there are no crowds all of a sudden.
How do you make your living mostly these days? Is it from streaming revenue? Is it still live touring? Is it a combination of everything? Licensing?
It's a combo of all those: streaming, record royalties, touring, publishing. It all kind of funnels in.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not really living at a time when a musician could choose to not play live.
Right.
Like Harry Nilsson. Didn't, he played 2 shows or something like that. I don't know that we're in that place anymore. But yeah.
There's a song that you wrote with the great songwriter Gregory Alan Isakov, which I love, off the new record, painting houses
Yeah.
that has this line that I feel like symbolizes what a lot of artists are going through right now. We're broke, but we're breathing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
as long as there's air that we can convey our ideas into the world, we're okay. But
Yeah.
we're also struggling.
Mm,
And a
yeah.
lot of us, like you, have families to support.
Yeah.
Do you ever question the life you've chosen as a father, as a uh, full grown adult? Because it's a
Yeah.
young man's game in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I do question it. I mean, I feel like, a sort of recurrent theme on every record that I've made is that one. And it depends on what day you get me. You know what I mean? Like, some days I'm very confident in my choices, and some days I'm not sure. Um, I've been saying this for years. So, but it, like, um, my kids get to see their dad as someone that is totally obsessed with what he does. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that that's good. I didn't have that. And, I mean, my parents loved their jobs, or liked their jobs. I don't know, depending on the day, to various degrees. Um, I'm feel very fortunate to make music for a living, to get to write songs and play them for people for a living. What a cool job. And what a cool job for my kids to get to see.
Right.
Um, there's no way around the fact that this past year and a half was the most that my kids have ever seen me in their lives. You know what I mean?
Did
So
they like it?
that's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we all liked it. And it does make you think whether there is some kind of happy medium. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, um, so I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that I could do. I don't know that it would make me make me as happy and challenge me as much as music does.
You have a graduate degree in American folklore, is that right?
Yes, in folklore. Yeah.
Do you use a lot of those readings and those teachings in your songwriting?
No,
No.
no, not really. No, that was a long time ago. Um, I don't think of myself as an academic songwriter. I don't feel particularly tied to any type of American musical tradition, although I am deeply invested in the idea of traditional music as being an important part of the fabric of this country. And I think of traditional American music as something that is at the center of my own musical practice. But like, I'm pretty fast and loose with how that music works. Um, you know, and um, I don't know. I don't feel super in touch with folklore in the academy at this point. Like, I don't know what is happening in that world. I think that it has evolved. It's probably evolved very significantly since I was there. I mean, it's a subject with a lot of pitfalls, I think, because it is the study of people, right? Which, um, it it has to be very, very delicate. Not delicate. It has to be very sensitive with how with how it works with people. You know, this sort of ethnographic practice, the study of people, it has a lot to answer for over the past several centuries. Um, so I don't know. I took a lot from that universe, and then I was done with it. You know.
Well, your music tends to examine yourself, right? And
Right.
examine the uh, evolution that's happening within your own psyche.
Right.
And, an album like Terms of Surrender, I think, shows the relationship you have with your growing children and the fears you have of being a person that's gone through depression and, uh, how your kids are going to grow up around a person that has the ability to dive into the darkness in a way. That song Happy Birthday Baby, which I think you wrote for your daughter, think of me better than I think of myself.
Right.
It's a tough line. It's beautiful though.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, that's a love song for my daughter. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of self-examination on my records. I'm not. I'm.
You started
I,
going to therapy during that record, I think, right?
yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, and I still go. I still see my therapist, not as regularly as I did then. Um, I found it helpful. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think my job as an artist is to be vulnerable. I don't necessarily think that has to be the directive of everyone that writes songs, but I just feel like um, the work of mine that I consider like my best work is is the work that examines places and relationships where tension exists. You know what I mean? Because tension to me means that something is unresolved, and to continue to explore it, especially in it's kind of a weird job, right? Like we have to sing these same songs every night. Um, and so to explore those tense places every night is actually helpful. I find,
Right.
people are often like, isn't it so hard? Isn't it so hard to sing that song every night? And not really, you know what I mean? Like not so much. It's not tortuous. No, it's kind of helpful.
It's cathartic.
Yeah, I think so. And like you're kind of studying from night to night, depending on your mood or your where you are. You're seeing the things that exist in the songs from different places. So I'm not seeing the songs in the same way every night. They almost always feel different to me.
Well, that song Sanctuary off the new record, right, where you're, talking about the loss of John Prine, but also about the economic hardships that a lot of folks are going through. Um, you had that line, feeling bad, feeling blue, can't get out of my own mind, but I know how to sing about it.
Hmm.
Right. It's like somehow if we can put it in the open, right? If we can sing it, if we can be in a room and actually acknowledge it, it makes it a little bit more okay than if we
Hmm.
pretend that it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that being able to say things out loud is the first step towards whatever healing needs to be done. You know what I mean? And I think that the generation previous to us, like my dad,
Right.
the men particularly, they didn't talk. They had a hard time actually conveying, articulating um, the things that were most troublesome to them. I think that there's a lot of I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but um, I think it's tremendously harmful, actually, and really unhealthy. Um, you know, like uh, so I try and keep that at the forefront of my mind, like, man, internalizing this stuff that hurts and never letting it out, that's really unhealthy.
Yeah. Did you have a relationship to your grandparents?
Yeah, I did. They were wonderful. Um, but yeah, like my grandfather, I didn't really know my grandfather on my dad's side. He died when I was really young. My grandfather on my mom's side was the same way. He just, like, I don't think that he really talked about stuff, not the stuff that really was poking at him.
Well, some of
um
the things that these guys saw, like in World War II, my grandfather, right?
right.
It's like you couldn't go there. It was like a
Yeah,
black box,
yeah,
right?
totally.
He's in the Philippines on a boat. This torpedo comes on the ship. It doesn't blow up. Somehow they're all saved, barely.
Right.
Like I wouldn't exist if that bomb went off. These are things that are like life or death, high trauma moments that are just like, yeah, it's just like one of those stories that grandpa tells, and don't ever sort of dive deeper, you
Right.
know?
Right, but I mean, imagine a scenario in which someone that has uh gone through something that is so traumatic that they can't even open the box up. Imagine, like, what, you know, letting them be in a space where they're encouraged to actually unpack some of that stuff. I think I think I think their worlds would feel much more welcoming. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I just I think there is just, yeah, all kinds of emotional arrest that has happened, particularly among men, for all kinds of different reasons. And it's hard to imagine creating a world that feels more just, more joyful, more open, without dealing with that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we don't we don't I don't know that we get to deal with climate change in an actual way unless we're also somehow dealing the with um, the sort of emotional, uh, sort of roadblocks that exist in so many of us, myself included. You know, um, so
Let me
who
ask you a
knows?
let me ask you a weird question. If you could have like an in-depth conversation over dinner with any person from history, who would it be?
Uh, Geesh. Hmm. I mean, I could give you a list.
All right, give me your top 5
I
lunch
don't even know
dates.
if these would be my top, but these are, like, just off. I'm really bad at coming up with, like, lists or who's your favorite. That's
Yeah.
sort of like a paralyzing question to me. I mean, maybe someone like Mary Oliver, who is a poet, or Octavia Butler, who is a sci-fi writer. Um, Maybe Joni Mitchell.
Hmm.
Um, or
Abraham Lincoln. Keep going.
Miles Davis, maybe.
All right.
Um, or Jerry Garcia. Uh, you know, there are a bunch more, but I suspect if I really were to, like, write out those people that I just listed, they're sort of like most compelling qualities. They probably all share something. You know what I mean? I think they're all seekers in one way or another, and I feel like that myself. So I could use some advice.
I think there's an article somewhere where you talked about your favorite record right now being Sly Stone's There's a Riot Going On,
Mm,
of which I just kind of got back into after seeing that Summer of Soul documentary that Questlove put out.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
the singular genius of his worldview through
uh,
funk and soul music,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
obviously he's a troubled guy that went through a lot of drug use, etc. But like at the height of his powers, there's really no one like him.
Hmm.
But that, he was creating personal protest music
That's
almost,
right.
which was, I think, really unique and kind of what you do in a way.
That's right. I mean, I think Sly was more outward facing. You know what I mean? Like he was writing anthems and he knew it. And he had the capacity to make it believable, compelling. The guy could do no wrong. Um, I mean, imagine living in a world in which Sly Stone, who is still alive, was still making music, like he's one of the greats.
Right.
He's one of the greats of the 20th century. um there's a Riot Going On is a very specific record. It really exists in a place of darkness. um I think it speaks a lot to the time during which it was written, but like everything about that record amplifies the darkness, right? The fact that he was recording on tape that was so, by the time he was done with the record, it was so distressed, the tape itself, the physical tape, that you
Yeah.
can you can hear that. You can hear that on the record, and it adds a sense of weariness. There's a
Mm.
certain weariness to that record, that kind of works hand in hand with the weird grooves and um the like the solitude of that record. It's a very solitary record.
Mm.
um there's just no other record like it. I mean, I wouldn't even say that it's my favorite record. It's just like there's no other record that sounds like that. You could search everywhere and never find a record that works in the same way. It's so fascinating to me. And it's such a it's such a uh, it's such like a sort of cry of distress. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like it really sounds like a cry of distress from a person that was living in a very complicated space. I love it. I mean, what a brilliant record.
Is there a Sly Stone song that you would love to cover someday?
Oh my gosh. Um I mean, I love I love everything on that record. Poet is a great one.
Mm.
My only weapon is my pen. What an incredible line. I wish I wrote that. Um, Family Affair. Uh, I don't know. There's so many good ones.
What's interesting
But
about,
I'm really drawn towards the lonelier sounding tracks, which
yeah,
actually, that's not what people think of when they think of Sly. They think of these big, like big buoyant anthems. Um, but like Riot Going On has the darkness.
well, there's this bizarre conundrum in American music where we, I think, lift up protest music into mainstream pop music, right? A
Mm,
song like Everyday People is just like part of the culture of America at this point. It's like you sang it
mm.
in choir as a kid, right?
Right.
And it's a song that is pretty like out there if you actually look at the lyrics, and yet you look it up and it's like in 4 different Toyota commercials, right? Like they're selling Toyota Priuses, talking about accepting everybody's skin color and trying to like be brothers and sisters from all races,
Yeah.
And yet it's like, and buy this Prius so we can all live in harmony.
Yeah. I think part of that is that Sly articulates such a complicated notion with such grace. You know what I mean? That the second you hear it, you're like, I want a piece of that. You work at Ford, you're like, I got the perfect thing to go with this commercial because there's nobody else that says it like Sly.
Has your music ever been used in a way that made you uncomfortable?
No. Not really. It's been used in a bunch of TV shows and stuff. It's fine. Usually people have no idea what it is.
Was there a TV show sequence that was particularly memorable that used your music that you like?
Well, it got a huge chunk, an actually edited version of Terms of Surrender, an edit that actually made the song longer, which is quite unheard of in TV syncs.
Yeah.
Was used in a pivotal scene in a television show called This Is Us. Do you know this show?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar. I mean, I know that it's a popular show. I know that Mandy Moore is in it.
My parents love it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people love it. But the song was used in a scene in that show a couple seasons ago, and like people were pretty excited about that. And I was like, cool, that's awesome. I'm glad that it fit the emotional tenor of whatever they were trying to accomplish there.
The show that kind of made me laugh, that used a snippet of our Dust Bowl Revival opening track from our newest record, you can barely hear it's there, is the HBO documentary about sex cults, The Vow.
Hey man, for some reason, every show needs some music.
That's what needed our song this last year for like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
We're talking about branding women to worship this tiny long-haired guy in upstate New York. And here's Dust Bowl Revival. Enjoy.
Right.
You never know.
You never know.
So what do you have coming up? Do you feel optimistic that you can actually bring your music back on the road? Or are you still being cautious?
I mean, both. I don't know. I think we are entering this really weird moment as traveling musicians where I don't, for the most part, I don't think that things are going to shut down. But what is happening is that we as musicians, non-experts, non-scientists, are basically being asked to create the terms and conditions around which we're going to be dealing with COVID, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, it feels tremendously unfair because I don't feel equipped to actually be making these decisions.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to put like vaccine protocol in place for our tours and hope that the venues are willing to work with us on it. And I suspect that most probably will be completely fine with it. I've played some festivals in the past month. I played Newport and they were great. They were, required vaccine. Same with a show I just played at a club in Aspen, Colorado. I just played another festival a couple days ago in Colorado, and it felt good. And actually being on stage and playing with the band and just doing our thing, like it felt so good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It felt so good. Logistically, it's kind of tough to be in a profession that is like predicated on traveling around with groups of people and getting people to gather in a
Yeah.
room together.
Yeah, I feel bad because we had to cancel, 4 or 5 dates in your neck of the woods, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Now, no one was forcing us to do this, but like half of our band has got COVID,
Yeah.
and I just had this breakthrough case, and I felt like diving into these small clubs in the South right now, with not much economic return,
Right.
felt too much of a risk,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly. And I feel
Yeah. It
bad because
didn't.
there are some very generous fans who are disappointed. And then, of course, this festival that kind of tied that little tour together canceled anyway. So
Yeah.
it just, people don't realize, I think, what a lot of their favorite bands are dealing with, trying to just create the space where they can feel safe and share their music and
Right.
bring the fans together. Because for me, the whole point of playing these shows is to actually be with the audience, right? Hug
Mm-hmm.
people after the show, talk by the merch table, have a drink afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of separate myself from that. I'm not famous enough to do that. Like I feel
Right.
like the whole point is to kind of interact with this small community that really supports you.
Yeah.
And I'd rather do that in a safer time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find it strange how quick the anti-vax community is to turn it into this thing in which we as artists are either being withholding or are somehow trying to wiggle out of doing our work, or
Right.
are trying to infringe on their quote unquote freedoms.
Right.
It's like, I'm trying to create a space in which many people can gather and feel safe, like my shows are safe places for many people. And I need it to continue to feel that way. I'm trying to make, and I'm sure you are too, like I'm trying to make the best decisions that I can with the amount of knowledge and understanding that I have about where we're at. You know what I
Right.
mean? But like, I'm not an expert. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. I don't want people to get sick.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, um, if you don't like the vaccine policy, then don't come to the show. You know, it makes no difference to me. Uh, and you know, I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're creating what you're creating. I think it means a lot to a lot of people. And
Thanks.
I want to do one last creative exercise before
Okay.
we take you out. The first thing that comes to your mind, try to not think about it. It could be from a moment in your life, from a song. The first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following phrases: tree climber.
I would say Curtis. Curtis, who is our tree trimmer here in North Carolina, and he walks like he's fallen out of a few trees in his time.
Were you a tree climber as a kid?
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm sitting here looking out at my backyard at all the trees that either he has trimmed. When I say trimmed, like we have massive trees in our backyard, so it's no joke. Um, like a limb from one of these trees fell and destroyed our car one time. Like it's those kind of trees. So we often have Curtis come out here. I'm like looking at these trees right now, thinking of Curtis coming to trim.
As a dad, how much leeway do you give your young children to just do their own thing out in the world? Like, are you a worry wart, or you just be like, no, climb that tree and fall off? It's good for you.
I mean, both. And I think most parents are both, you know. I want my kids to have the confidence to walk out the front door and play and explore, and do things away from me and my wife, because that's important. It's an important way of understanding yourself, you know. At the same time, I totally worry, and so like sometimes I just have to take that and stick it in my pocket and just like live with it, and encourage my kids to go do something that is really going to make me worry about them, because I think that's how you become a human.
All right, next one is cicada scream.
Oh, um, the South, I say the South. Yeah. Cicadas, the sound of cicadas wasn't something that I heard in California. So uh, my first uh, exposure to it was moving to North Carolina in 2007.
All right, next one is cave scrabble.
Cave Scrabble. Uh, I don't know. What does that even mean?
Oh, I just totally I read that wrong. Cave scramble.
Cave Scramble? I don't know. Maybe something from the Lord of the Rings trilogy? I think there's a part when Frodo and Samwise are trying to get out of the cave and Gollum is in pursuit of them.
Were you a fan of Tolkien?
Big time. Still am.
They're making that new TV show, I think, right? On Amazon.
I don't know. Well, I don't know
Yeah,
what it
there's like a
is.
huge, like $1 billion massive rollout of like an actual series about Lord of the Rings, which will be
Really? Like, wow.
exciting for fans, I think.
Are you a fan?
Not as much as many people, but I have seen all the movies. I haven't read any of the books except for The Hobbit when I was a kid. I have
Yeah.
no interest in like his sort of like overall worldview, but I love the movies. Like I've seen
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
movies like 3 times. Like they're
Yeah.
just on TV and you're like, yep, this is my afternoon. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just like a journey that you want to be on.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, I'm a huge fan of fantasy and sci-fi, and always have been. And my son has in the past couple of years has really gotten into Dungeons and Dragons, which is
Mm.
connected to that world, and um, yeah. So I've been back in that place probably more than most adults in the past few years.
All right, last one is sequin dress.
Um, Sequin dress. Um, there's an item of clothing that my daughter has that is a sequin skirt that she's pretty enthusiastic about. She just turned 8.
I mean, why wouldn't you be enthusiastic about that when you're 8?
Yeah, sequins are cool.
With when you see yourself in 30 years, do you still see yourself playing music and creating new records?
Mm, I see myself still being creative in some capacity. Um, it's hard to know what my relationship will be to making songs. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe I will, or maybe there will be some other thing that feels more in tune with where I'm at creatively then. It's hard to say. Um, I feel like songs are very for me right now, songs feel like the most concise way to convey certain things. In the same way that like a poem on the page does, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I kind of hope that am connected to something that compels me on the day to day. Yeah.
I know this is sometimes difficult, but can you try reading Angels in the Headlights as a poem instead of a song? Because I feel like it could be treated like a piece of poetry. And I feel like a lot of times songs are not treated in that way. Like they're treated as industrial commodities, whereas really they're sonic poetry, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought of the way that I write as inspired by poetry more than other songs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm often looking at the way that the words sit on the page. That is something that I find really compelling. Is the way that words sit on the page, the way that the lines are broken up, and that's something that for me comes from poetry. You know, like phrasing and the way the like need for certain syllables and stuff like that is to me is like is more poetry um than music, I think.
Okay, let's pretend we're at a ceremony where the state of North Carolina has anointed you its poet laureate. And now here's MC Taylor reading Angels in the Headlights.
Well, this is a problem because I don't know the words off the top of my head. I'd have to
I know
look at them.
it's really hard to do that off of context. But the now the writer burns his name like a flame across the water, but you can't free him. You might be him. Just the same, it's plain. The stakes are growing longer. Did you play for keeps, kid? Because you gotta.
There you go. You just did it. It sounded great.
Tune in next time.
I'll tell you a funny story about that song, actually, is that for most of its life, it was instrumental. There were no words, there was no vocal melody at all. And we got so far as to have the whole record mixed and sequenced. And I was sending it around to friends. And one of my friends, who I won't name, not really for any good reason, but just so he's doesn't feel like he's put on the spot, he was very adamant. He was like, you either need to put some words, you need to sing on this song, or you need to take it off the record. And I was like, okay. And he felt very strongly about it. And he's someone that I trust, actually. He's the one that there was another title for Quietly Blowing It that was it was totally the wrong title. and so I was talking to him about it, same person, and he was like, I mean, the record's called Quietly Blowing It. Like, clearly that's what the record's called. And I was like, oh yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right. Same guy was like, you need to either sing on this song, Angel in the Headlights, or take it off. Like, I see what you're trying to do with like kind of breaking up the record with an instrumental thing, but like, it doesn't really work. And I sort of took that as a challenge instead of being like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I was like, okay, I'm actually going to try and write words to this and sing it. So I told like my buddy Scott, the mix engineer, like, I'm going to sing on this song. He's like, what? Okay. So I booked the studio, and I had some other stuff to do too. But yeah, so that's where that came from. Originally, it was a song with no words.
Well, I love it.
Thanks.
All right, man. Well, keep doing what you do.
Thanks, bud. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. And stay safe out there.
Yeah, you too. Where am I going to send this? audio?
If you can send it to showontheroadpod@gmail, that would be awesome.
Sure. I'm gonna just write it down.
And I'm gonna try to get this out either this week or next week.
Okay,
the shows
cool.
come out on Thursdays usually.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.